I moved into my new house with high hopes, expecting a fresh start. However, it wasn't long before I realized that my next-door neighbor's 23-year-old son, Jeremy, was trouble. On my very first day, he pulled an armed robbery prank, knocking on my door with a mask and pulling out a knife. He forced his way inside, tied my hands behind my back, and only then revealed it was a joke by taking off his mask. I was horrified but tried to brush it off as a tasteless prank. However, things only got worse from there. Jeremy's behavior became increasingly disturbing in the following weeks. He uprooted the flowers in my garden, keyed my car after I confronted him, and even broke into my house by climbing through a window while I was in the bath. But the breaking point came when he killed my dog, Max, a 5-month-old Jack Russell who had defended me when Jeremy aggressively grabbed my arm during an argument. In retaliation, Jeremy brutally kicked my puppy, and that night, I found Max dead in the backyard with a massive wound in his abdomen. My heart shattered as I cradled Max's lifeless body, consumed by grief and rage. I called the police, but without hard evidence, they were dismissive. Despite filing a report, it was clear they considered it a minor issue. Jeremy knew this, and his behavior only escalated. He began taunting me, standing on his porch with a smug grin, knowing full well the authorities wouldn't do anything. My garden was vandalized again, my car's tires were slashed, and Jeremy continued to intimidate me at every opportunity. His mother, Linda, tried to excuse his behavior, coming over to my house with a half-hearted apology and blaming me for leaving Max unsupervised. Her defense of her son infuriated me. I told her that if she didn't do something about Jeremy, it would only get worse. But she refused to acknowledge the severity of his actions, dismissing them as just Jeremy being Jeremy. As the weeks passed, Jeremy's harassment continued, and I felt trapped in my own home. Then one night, I found a threatening note slipped under my door, "Say goodbye to your house next." That was the final straw. I went back to the police, bringing the letter and documenting every instance of harassment and vandalism. I even installed security cameras around my property, hoping to catch him in the act. One evening, a brick was thrown through my sliding glass door, attached to another threat, "Next time it'll be you." This time, the police responded more seriously. An officer arrived to take photos and look at the security footage, but the quality wasn't clear enough to definitively identify Jeremy. Still, they promised to keep a patrol car nearby. For a few days, things quieted down, but then my shed was set on fire. By the time I extinguished the flames, everything inside was destroyed. I gathered all the evidence I had, letters, journal entries, and security footage, and went back to the police station, determined not to leave until they took action. A detective finally agreed to investigate, and shortly afterward, Jeremy was arrested. However, it wasn't for the shed fire or the threats against me. It turned out he had been caught breaking into another neighbor's house. The police uncovered evidence linking Jeremy to multiple break-ins across the neighborhood. I was shocked to learn that I wasn't his only victim. He had been terrorizing the entire community. It was a relief when he was finally arrested, but I couldn't shake the lingering fear that had taken root during those months of torment. Despite his arrest, I remained on edge. A strange car began circling my block, slowing down in front of my house. It happened multiple times over the course of a few days, and I feared that someone connected to Jeremy was trying to intimidate me. I wrote down the license plate and called the police, but they assured me there was no immediate threat. Still, the car's presence left me uneasy. As the court date for Jeremy's trial approached, I began receiving anonymous letters urging me to drop the charges. The letters were typed, with no return address, but I suspected Linda was behind them. She had been quiet since Jeremy's arrest but still watched me from her porch with a cold, calculating stare. I refused to back down. I had come too far to let fear stop me now. On the day of the trial, Jeremy sat across the courtroom, expressionless, while the prosecution laid out all the evidence, footage from my security cameras, the threatening letters, and testimony about the pattern of harassment. Linda sat behind him, glaring at me, still unwilling to accept that her son was anything less than a victim. In the end, Jeremy was found guilty on multiple charges, not just for what he had done to me, but for the break-ins and other crimes he had committed in the neighborhood. The judge sentenced him to several years in prison. As the verdict was read, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Finally, it was over. After the trial, I slowly began to rebuild my life. I replanted my garden, repaired the damage to my house, and tried to move on. It wasn't easy. Every creak in the house still made me jump, and I double-checked the locks on my doors constantly. But knowing that Jeremy was behind bars helped me feel safe again. Max's death stayed with me. I missed him every day, but I knew I had done everything I could to honor his memory by standing up to the person who had taken him from me. As for Linda, I rarely saw her after the trial. Eventually, she moved away, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The nightmare Jeremy had brought into my life had finally come to an end, and although I hadn't expected my fresh start to be so turbulent, I had emerged from it stronger and more resilient. My house was no longer a place of fear, it was finally a home again.